Proctor testified that he did not review the Life 360 report to corroborate statements as to when Colin got home and whether or not Allie picked him up and at the time she said and drove him to where she said she did. Proctor lives only 2 to 3 miles from Fairview and only about a mile from the McCabe's. Jackson asked him about the walking distance and he said it's only about a mile walk through the woods to get to 34 Fairview. Very interesting. Jackson asked him if he had officers canvass the area around the high school or on that route for video surveillance of the area. And the answer was no. But he did a thorough investigation. He knew January 29th, before the end of the day, that it was all wrapped up. He said he did, though, have conversations about video surveillance of the area surrounding Canton High School and filling stations in the area.
A text communication between Officer Galanis and myself.
Taking a look at those text communications, do you see the inclusive dates of those on the face sheet?
Yes.
Document?
I do.
What are those inclusive dates?
First message sent, date and time, February 18th, 2022, 1:02 p.m. Last message sent, date and time, February 18th, 2022.
So he didn't have a conversation about such footage until mid-February? Why? And if it was all wrapped up, what's he doing?
Your Honor, may I publish?
Is there any objection?
Same one, but
I'll let you publish it.
Thank you. In this text, you're asking a member of the Canton Police Department to look around the surrounding area of 34 Fairview Road for camera equipment, correct?
I was asking if they had any knowledge of cameras in the area.
Okay. And of course, that was to an officer who was employed by which department?
Canton Police Department.
Which you knew at the time that you asked for assistance in February of 2022 had been recused from the case, correct?
Correct.
And should have no investigative involvement in the case, correct?
I did not request for them to pull video. I just simply asked, what are some good cameras in the area?
Which is an assistance for you in your investigation, correct?
They have more knowledge in the area as far as useful cameras. So yes, I reached out regarding cameras in the area.
Or assistance from Canton PD officers, correct?
Yes.
Whom you knew to be recused.
Yes.
Correct? Yes. You specifically asked officers.
I understand Trooper Proctor's excuse. That doesn't mean, however, that he should just go with that. He is certainly capable of finding out on his own or finding out through his own police service. He doesn't need to go to Canton PD for that. And if he's asking questions of Canton PD, knowing they're recused, knowing there's a conflict, if the conflict is such that there is real concern as opposed to perceived concern about anybody interfering, well, they now have the heads up. So this was a bad move. I can't say that he was trying to give a heads up. It kind of looks to me like he's lazy.
Officer Galanis, whether, quote, the high school had cameras facing the street, correct?
Correct.
And Officer Galanis writes back, the Canton Mutual gas station has unreal cameras. That's how I picked up that kid, and it had him walking into the woods by the new street Larkin Court, correct?
Correct.
So he was specifically looking for footage from that area, from the high school. And I have a question. Since he had everything wrapped up by January 29th, since he told his friends, Brian Albert's a cop, so it's going to be cut and dry. Since this is later, and Reed had already been arrested, and he has claimed over and over that by this time, the evidence was compelling. It was overwhelming. What then did he intend to do with any footage he found from the cameras in the area of the high school? And when you run through the possibilities in your mind, remember who is the common link between a number of items disappearing? Who had access and control to not only John O'Keefe's ring video footage, but also the activity logs from Ring sent to Trooper Proctor? What did he intend to do with these videos if he obtained them?
You responded, good to know, I'll add that to the list, correct?
Yes.
Did any of the reports you turned over in discovery ever mention the Canton Mutual gas station cameras or the cameras from Canton High School?
No, because we did not retrieve any video from those locations.
And you did.
So it's left out of his report. And looking for something in the course of an investigation and finding the absence of something, whether that be the absence of footage, the absence of evidence, you're supposed to put that in your report, because you get a defense lawyer like this saying, well, did you do this? Did you do this? And unless you've written it in a report, you didn't do that. And if they can prove you did do that thing and didn't put it in your report, well, then the obvious question is, so why didn't you say so? You do put those things in your report, and it helps the prosecution as well, because they can look at that and say, okay, these officers took all the steps. They went down other avenues. And to go down other avenues is also an argument that the prosecutor can make against a defense lawyer's allegation of tunnel vision. Having said that, the problem in this case is that seeking that information wasn't done until after the charges were laid. So Lally, in this case, could not have used that to argue against tunnel vision because it happened subsequent to them making up their mind. And this kind of information, we looked here and didn't find anything, also helps with an investigation if it's ongoing, because you don't want officers wasting time going looking for something that somebody already looked for and already ruled out. And this particular trooper in this case was responsible for that case file. So that's even more reason why it should have been in a report. It should have been in the file. That is part of his job. So I ask you, is he lazy? Is he incompetent? Or is he covering up? Because this is not procedure.
You didn't mention in your report that you even sought the footage from those locations, correct?
I don't believe so.
You did say that you would add it to the, quote, list. Is that right?
Yes.
And you're aware, obviously, as one of your responsibilities, to maintain and keep your handwritten notes from all communications, all investigative activities involved in the case, correct?
Yes.
And you have no notes on this conversation, correct?
Correct.
You know, in some police services, they make you write it in your notebook if you went for coffee somewhere. But to fail to write something in your notebook or make note of it somewhere officially when it is part of the investigation is pretty bad.
As the lead
He's thirsty again. He's so thirsty during cross, eh?
investigator, Trooper Proctor, you are responsible ultimately for deciding which witnesses will be interviewed and which witnesses will not be interviewed, correct?
Like I mentioned yesterday or Monday, it's a collaborative effort within the office, so we bounce ideas off each other as far as what witnesses need to be interviewed, etc. So it's more of a group effort, a group decision.
But as the case officer, you make some of the final decisions on who's going to be investigated, who's going to be interviewed, things of that nature, right?
It facilitates certain areas, yes.
That's not what he said earlier. What he said earlier is he delegates the tasks. He did say, yes, it's a collaborative effort. And what he's saying here about, we bounce things off of each other, yes, that happens and that should happen. But as the lead investigator, he's going to have a lot of influence over what gets pursued and what doesn't. And if they came to the decision that we are or are not going to do a particular thing, then there would be a clear reason or a line of reasoning for that, right? Whether that reasoning turns out to be correct or not, there is reasoning behind those decisions. In respect to this particular question that he's being asked, if there was some reasoning behind whatever decision he made, because he knows what's about to be asked. I don't. If there's reasoning, he could have just said so instead of blah, blah, blah. It's a collaborative effort. He's trying to diffuse responsibility, and that doesn't sit well with me either. You know, leaders are supposed to take responsibility.
I want to talk about some of the witnesses that you interviewed in the days and weeks immediately following Mr. O'Keefe's death. You interviewed Brian Albert, correct?
Correct.
Nicole Albert, yes?
Yes.
Chris Albert?
Yes.
Julie Albert?
Yes.
Jennifer McCabe?
Yes.
Her husband, Matt McCabe?
Correct.
All those individuals are related in one way or another, either through marriage or otherwise, to each other, correct?
Yes, that's my understanding.
And you also interviewed Brian Higgins, is that right?
Yes.
I want to talk for a second about the individuals that you did not immediately choose to interview. Julie Nagel wasn't interviewed until October 2022, correct?
Correct.
That's 7 months after the incident, right?
Correct.
Sarah Levinson was not interviewed until October of 2022, also 7 months later, correct?
Correct.
Caitlin Albert was interviewed July 6, 2023, correct?
Yes.
That's 16 months after the incident. Is that right?
Correct.
Brian Albert Jr., July 6, 2023, right?
Yes, sir.
Allie McCabe, August of 2023, correct?
Yes, sir.
That's 18 months after the incident, correct?
Correct.
Heather Maxson, she was not interviewed until September 21st, 2023, 17 months later, correct?
Correct.
All right, that's actually, my math is off. That's about 18 months later. Is that right?
Correct.
Richard D'Antano, September 2nd, 2023. Is that right?
Yes.
So you waited more than 18 months to interview him as well. Is that right?
Yes.
And then Brian.
That's unforgivable. And consider that on January 29th, he had it all wrapped up. And these witnesses aren't peripheral witnesses. This is not about going and getting extra corroboration for something you already knew to sort of tighten up your case. These are people who were at the house. These are people who saw things that are material, that do matter. When you delay interviewing a witness, a couple of things happen. One is that memories fade, they become distorted. It becomes easier to influence at the time of the questioning. Also, that provides a lot of time and space for other influences to come into play on a witness's recollection, and things get easily tainted. And it doesn't mean that those witnesses will lie. Sometimes a witness will remember for a good long time. Between the time a witness sees or experiences an incident and the time that their brain encodes that's one gap during which it's possible for memory to become corrupted. I guess I'll say it that way. I don't mean corrupted in a bad way. I mean like sort of like a computer file gets corrupted. And then between the time that it is first encoded and each recall, there are intervening bits of information that go into the brain that will modify that memory. So news articles, people talking about it, any number of things that can modify that memory. So each time it's recollected, it can be changed a little bit, and people will do things without any kind of malice, where they're trying to put the puzzle pieces together in their mind. Oh, well, I guess this thing must have happened because of this thing. So they fill in those gaps with information that makes sense to them, but those little bits that they filled in, they aren't fact. And the person doesn't have to be intending to mislead or anything. They're just trying to sort it out in their brain and put it somewhere. You don't have to have gone to homicide school to know this. Every investigator knows that you need to interview people as quickly as possible. And of course, you can't interview everybody all at once. They're human, they got to eat and sleep and go home sometimes. But you do it as quickly as possible and you set your priorities and you get them pinned down or locked in and you go down your list. You conduct your interviews as soon as possible after the event. He knows this. If he doesn't know this, he shouldn't even be on the road, never mind an homicide. So what the heck?
Brian Loughran, snowplow driver, August 2023, 17 months after the incident. Correct?
Correct.
I want to talk for a second about this last individual, Brian Loughran. He also goes by the name Lucky. Is that right?
Yes.
Lucky Loughran. You testified under oath on April 21st, 2022 in the state court grand jury proceeding that no snowplow traveled down Fairview Road on January 29th, correct?
Correct.
Why did you say that, Trooper Proctor?
That was based off interviews with Mr. Trotter, that the plows weren't out until they met up at 2:30, and then it was my understanding they were focusing on the main roadways.
I recall that testimony. What the witness had said was, this was the plan we had in advance of this snowstorm. This is how we scheduled things. And I commented at the time, well, that's your plan, that's your schedule. It doesn't mean it went down like that. It doesn't mean that was executed precisely in that way. And you all know somebody can be scheduled to come into work and they don't come in. Just because they're on the schedule doesn't mean that they showed up for work that day, as an example. So Proctor is trying to use this to weasel out of what he knows he's done and not done.
You're aware that Michael Trotta testified in this case?
Okay.
Were you aware or not?
No.
Okay. You did, in fact, interview Michael Trotta, did you not?
Yes.
And isn't it true that Michael Trotta told you that, in fact, Brian Loughran was plowing 34 Fairview that morning?
Objection.
Is that what he told you?
I don't recall that statement from him.
Michael Trotta testified that that's what he told you. Do you have any quarrel with that?
Objection.
That's the state.
In reality, Trooper Proctor, you did not want to speak to anybody in the weeks and months following this incident who didn't fit your narrative, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow it. Is that true?
That's simply not true. Absolutely not.
There's his tell.
Certainly you didn't want to talk to anybody who could say that there was no body on the lawn at 2:30 in the morning. Is that right?
No, it's not true.
Are you aware that Lucky Loughran, in fact, did report that there was nobody on
Objection,
the
Your
lawn
Honor.
at 2:30?
So the objection sustained. I'm going to strike that.
Did you include anything in your investigative report throughout the entire time you've been in charge of this investigation about Lucky Loughran and his observations?
Not until Sergeant Buchanan and I interviewed him.
And that was when?
I can't recall the exact date.
And that was after the defense brought him to your attention, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Not true?
Correct.
Yeah, the defense has been doing the job of the police.
Are you still the case agent in charge of this case?
Yes.
As the lead investigator and the case agent, you're aware it's also your responsibility and your obligation to investigate all potential individuals, right? All potential suspects.
Yes.
You're obligated to investigate.
Did you catch that pause between that question and answer? He knows the answer is yes. He knows that. It should have been easy. He shouldn't have had to sit there and think about it.
Investigate anybody who would have a motive, a means, and an opportunity to commit the crime or the offense, correct?
Correct.
Motive includes anything from financial gain to could just be revenge, right?
Yes.
Could be a lover's quarrel, correct?
Yes.
Or it could be someone who's interested in someone romantically, correct?
Could be an argument inside of a vehicle.
Just want to make a couple of comments about motive. The prosecution doesn't have to prove motive in any case, but we're talking here about an investigation. So motive does come into it. Even though they don't have to prove it, it does help with exploring different avenues. And any experienced investigator knows that there are motives for the commission of crimes, and including some pretty horrible ones, that wouldn't make sense to the average person, that the average person wouldn't think of that. And sometimes a motive is very specific to a specific perpetrator. And one of the things that Jackson brought up is romantic interest. And I suspect a number of people will right away think about Higgins. And it is common, you might be surprised at how common, that a man being told no, or a woman ignoring a man, or not returning his affection, or not responding in the manner he would like, is enough for some men to react in the extreme, to plot, to get revenge. And I know that some people will think, oh, Higgins. But as this has gone on, I'm not so sure about that avenue for motive. Certainly it would have to be investigated. Are all of these people going to protect Higgins? I get the sense that Higgins might be disposable for the Alberts if it comes down to it, just like everybody else is disposable. But a whole lot of people would protect Brian Albert. Just a thought.
So, or it could be an argument contained inside a vehicle as well.
Yeah, which is the conclusion you jumped to 17 hours into your investigation, right?
Objection.
Is that right?
It's something, evidence we have contained within cell phones reiterates that fact.
That wasn't the question, first of all. He couldn't say no. So Jackson phrases it as, well, that's the conclusion you jumped to. So obviously Proctor isn't going to like that way of phrasing it, except I think that the way of phrasing it is accurate. As of January 29th, they had no evidence of any argument inside a car. This is a narrative being pushed. This is a stereotype of a woman and a relationship, a picture that has been painted right from the beginning. This is Jen McCabe's nastiness that has been capitalized on here and is being used. Stereotypes are effective. So he answers here, oh, well, later information says this. Well, bud, you're being asked on January 29th when you made the decision, wrapped up, cut and dry. He didn't have that information, and we've yet to see that. So I don't even know what that's going to be about. But thus far, we haven't seen that. And as of January 29th, he certainly did not have any evidence of any kind of argument. And let's talk for a second about motive of witnesses, reasons to lie, and how you assess things. If we take his word for it, he has two conflicting statements. One saying that Karen Reed dropped him off and left. There was no crash. He attended the party at the Alberts. And she didn't. She left. She had stomach problems. And there was no mention of any kind of argument in the vehicle. The other statement is from Jen McCabe saying, oh, they had an argument in the vehicle. Jen McCabe, who wasn't in the vehicle, who couldn't have known that. Unless, of course, Karen and John did have an argument and John then told Jen that they had an argument in the car. But, nobody can say that because that would have meant that he was alive and well and talking to Jen McCabe after Karen left. So he's got these two witnesses saying things that are different. Both of them potentially have reason to lie because at this point, the police don't know what happened. So is Jen lying to cover up something that was going on in the house and point the finger elsewhere? Or is Karen lying for the same reason, to cover up something and point the finger elsewhere? So he decided just to believe one or the other, or pursue one avenue over another and not pursue both. And if he wanted to argue, well, then later we found taillight pieces, okay, Did you also luminol the basement? Did you look in the house? Did you get crime scene services inside that house? Because you could have and should have gone into that house right away. And if Brian Albert had nothing to hide, he would consent to that, right? I mean, he's a Boston police officer. He knows how important that is. He knows how it works. He knows that if there's nothing amiss, it is better for the police to be able to go in and just put that to rest. But that's not what happened. And he's going to sit here and jump time frames to give his rationale.
When you decided that you were going to make sure that the girl, I think that's what you called her, the girl was going to have serious charges brought against her 17 hours into your investigation, you didn't have any evidence whatsoever that there was an argument inside the vehicle, did you?
To go towards intent? No. But as far as the physical evidence goes, we have compelling evidence indicating Miss Reed struck Mr. O'Keefe with her vehicle.
So you just did this.
Mr. Jackson, I just have to keep your voice up, Trooper Proctor, okay?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
You just did this piecemeal. So when you decided that the girl, Miss Reed, was going to get serious charges against her, didn't have any indication of any intent, you just decided, oh, okay, I'm just going to go with the physical evidence today. I'll figure out intent later. I'll figure out motive later. Right?
Yes.
Motive, means, and opportunity. We've talked a little bit about motive. What about means? The physical ability to commit the crime, right? That's obviously important.
Yes.
And the opportunity. It's a physical proximity to the incident, correct? Or the
Correct.
physical ability to commit the crime, correct?
Correct.
Did you investigate all potential suspects who would have had the motive, means, and opportunity to kill John O'Keefe?
Yes, and that.
Long pause there, eh? And he knows he has to say yes. He knows he has to say yes because saying no is absolutely unacceptable. And he knows that. And he knows what tunnel vision is. And he knows what this defense lawyer is going after here. He knows that. And he's about to, I suspect, give a narrative explanation, justification.
Motive, means, factored in with the physical evidence, pointed directly at Miss Reed. There's no one else had any motive. Mr. O'Keefe never went inside Fairview Road.
How does he know that no one else had any motive? He didn't investigate. He can't know whether they did or didn't. At that point, he couldn't rule all of those people in or out. It's impossible for this statement that he is making on the stand to be a truthful statement. He could not have known because he didn't investigate it. He decided where he wanted to go, and that's where he went, to the exclusion of all other possibilities. Didn't even look. Didn't even pretend to look. Didn't even give a perfunctory glance at all of that. He wanted a specific outcome, and that's what he set out to do. And if he's willing to have it all wrapped up on the 29th, he's willing to provide inside information to his sister on the 29th at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They don't even have Reed's car yet. He's willing to give confidential information on an ongoing investigation to civilians in addition to his sister. He jokes about looking through her phone, looking to find nudes. All of the remarks from those disgusting text messages you heard, they laugh and joke about it. He fails to write reports. He fails to conduct interviews. He fails to make notations. Evidence in his possession goes missing. He blames other people. He deflects. He minimizes. And the list goes on. He's willing to do all of that. What wouldn't he do? Oh, and let's not forget, send the gift to my wife.
And you got all that, of course, from the Alberts and the McCabe's, right?
Yes.
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Let's talk about Brian Higgins for a second. You know that name?
I do, sir.
You personally interviewed Mr. Higgins, correct?
Sergeant Buchanan and I did, yes.
You keep adding other people into the interviews. I'm asking what you did, not what you and somebody else did. Did you personally interview Brian Higgins?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Yes, I did.
He's a fellow law enforcement officer, and you knew that, right?
Yes.
He was a colleague of yours, correct?
He worked in a different agency, yes.
You waited until February 10th to conduct a pre-scheduled interview with Mr. Higgins, didn't you?
Yes.
And you interviewed him in the presence of his attorney, correct?
Correct.
He told you that he was engaged in a flirtatious relationship with Miss Reed?
He did.
As a matter of fact, he told you that he was engaged in a flirtatious relationship with Miss Reed over text messages, but on at least one occasion that resulted in a kiss, correct?
Yes.
And then he also told you that he had taken the liberty to extract certain conversations from his own cell phone, right?
Correct.
And he brought you a hard copy of those text messages, right?
He did.
And you knew that those text messages were messages that he curated to give to you, right?
Yes.
He's the one that made the determination of what was important, what was not important to give to you, his interviewer, right?
Objection.
Was that your understanding, Trooper?
It was my understanding Mr. Higgins was being very forthcoming by providing those messages. It's not uncommon for witnesses to take screenshots or send us emails or send us text messages. So he just had a different means of producing text messages.
Well, you were
It is not uncommon for witnesses to provide screenshots or emails or text messages. That's true. For somebody to provide information could make you think this person is forthcoming. It could also make you think that they're trying to hide something else. One of the red flags that an investigator knows is when somebody tries to be overly helpful. And the fact that Higgins is fellow law enforcement might cause an investigator to be more inclined. Again, bias. I mean, we all have biases. It might cause an investigator to be more inclined to trust the person and perhaps even less able to see the red flag. But Brian Higgins also knows how things work. He knows that he shouldn't be messing with potential evidence at all. That if he wanted to be helpful, he could simply hand over his phone. And let me ask you another question. In any other homicide case, if you heard that a potential suspect handed over only the information that they thought was going to get found out anyway, or was obviously incomplete, and the investigator said, gee, thanks, okay, you're clear, it's all good, what would you think about that?
actually asked that question in a different proceeding, under different questioning, and you were asked whether or not in your career as a law enforcement officer has any person or witness ever brought a self-extraction of text messages to an in-person interview, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Correct. Most
And your answer was, Trooper Proctor, you had never experienced that in the history of your career, correct?
Correct.
So you became aware pretty early on that Mr. Higgins at least had a motive to want to visit harm on John O'Keefe, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
No, absolutely not.
Well, you knew he had this flirtatious relationship with Karen Reed, is that right?
Yes.
You became aware that he ignored, you saw the text messages, you became aware that Karen Reed actually ignored text messages from Mr. Higgins while at the Waterfall Bar and Grill with John O'Keefe, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Yes.
You were aware that at 12:20 a.m., Brian Higgins sent a text message to John O'Keefe, coaxing him to 34 Fairview, correct?
Objection.
You're aware that at 2:20 a.m., Brian Higgins sent a text message to John O'Keefe, prompting him to go to 34 Fairview, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow that one. Go ahead.
I don't recall that text.
Do you recall a text from Brian Higgins to John O'Keefe after they left Waterfall? Where are you at?
I don't recall that one either.
This is a problem. The I don't recall is a I want to get out of this question. In my opinion, this I don't recall. But I think it's not a good answer. I think this backfires. And the reason is if he has a rational explanation an objective, thought out reason why he's saying, oh, Brian Higgins is not a suspect at all. He had no motive at all. If he has that in his head, that's his conclusion. Well, okay, then why? Explain how it is that you came to that conclusion. And the messages that Jackson is bringing up here are relevant to whether or not one comes to that conclusion. And in order to come to the conclusion that Proctor claims he has come to, you would have to think about these particular text messages and explain them away. There would have to be something that says, okay, yes, these are here, but this is why they don't go to this conclusion or that conclusion. So for him to not remember such an important piece of information that should have gone into his rationale is a problem then. So I don't recall is not a good answer in this case. And I'm just looking at his face here. I just happened to hit pause right here. I think he's angry. There are moments when I think I see a suppressed smirk. His lips give him away a lot. Just an observation.
You also recognized that Brian Higgins certainly had the means to commit the crime, correct?
No, I don't.
He's a big guy. Certainly had the physical ability to get into a physical altercation with John O'Keefe, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow that.
Just because he's a big guy doesn't mean doesn't have the means or the motive to hurt Mr. O'Keefe.
I wouldn't ask
They
you
were
about
friends.
I wasn't asking about motive. I'm asking about means. Could he do it? Could he throw a punch? Knock a guy down, knock a guy out?
I can't speak to his fighting ability, sir.
Well, you've met.
So first the answer is no, he doesn't have the meat. Then it's, well, I don't know. I can't speak to his fighting ability. Well, hang on. You're supposed to figure that out. You're supposed to have ruled that in or out. And if you've ruled it out, well, then you do know. And John O'Keefe's injuries are consistent with a physical altercation. And I would argue that they are more consistent with a physical altercation than they are with a motor vehicle collision. But we'll have to wait for the experts to talk about that. And when he says Higgins has no motive, well, he's showing us he's discounted pretty much everything that doesn't fit his narrative. He's displaying his tunnel vision right here on the stand.
Met him, right?
That one interview, yes.
Yeah, he's huge. Do you agree?
Objection.
Sustained.
He's a big dude, right?
Yeah, he's a big guy.
Bigger than me, right?
Yeah.
Bigger than you.
Yep.
You knew that he was former military?
I did, yes.
And he's a trained ATF agent, federal agent, right?
Yes.
And you were in possession of video surveillance from the Waterfall Bar and Grill, correct?
Yes.
And literally in the minutes before John O'Keefe's death, you saw video surveillance of Brian Higgins and Brian Albert taking fighting stances with one another, correct?
I interpreted that as horsing around.
I didn't ask you how you interpreted it, Trooper Proctor. I asked you if you saw it.
Objection.
Sustained.
Did you see it or not?
I did.
And what you saw was these guys taking fighting stances, correct?
Objection.
Is that what you saw?
Playful fight stances.
But you waited until February 10th to interview him, correct?
Yes.
And you decided not to image his phone. Is that right?
Correct.
You didn't ask for consent to search his phone or to take his phone, correct?
No.
You didn't seek a search warrant to get his phone. Is that right?
No, sir.
Did you know that on January 29th at 2:22 a.m., there was a call between him and Brian Albert that morning?
I was not aware of that.
Not aware of that. And why is that? Could it be because you didn't actually do an investigation? Could it be that maybe you were tunnel visioned and you discounted every other possibility? Could it be that you wanted a particular end result So you engaged in willful blindness? Could it be that you already had it all wrapped up on the 29th? Crikey, why you want to go do the extra work? Why is that? Why don't you know that? Why aren't you aware of that by that time? Why aren't you going further once you find out that there were these text messages exchanged between the accused and this witness? Why don't you dig further into that? Why? Give me a legitimate reason. There isn't one.
Might have been important to your investigation, don't you think?
Objection.
Allow it.
Depends what that. I don't know what the call was about.
Sorry, finish that. Depends.
I don't know what the call was about. I don't know if they actually connected and communicated what the length of the call was. So
Exactly. He doesn't know. Doesn't know that there was a call. Doesn't know if they connected and communicated. It is his job to know. It is his job to find out. But he either couldn't be bothered or he didn't want to.
Right. And you never asked, did you?
I was unaware that call took place.
And you were unaware that that call took place because you didn't get his phone, Trooper Proctor, right?
Typically, we don't get witnesses' phones, sir.
You were unaware of that call at that time.
You don't run around getting every witness's phone. You don't. But potential suspects? Yeah, you do. Because if you can rule somebody out, you want to do that. You want to do that so that you can move on effectively. If that avenue of investigation is closed, you want to be sure that it's closed so you don't have to worry about it anymore. You want to put outstanding questions to bed and be done with it. But he didn't. And all of this is after he's made up his mind anyway. This is way after the 29th when it was cut and dry.
Because you didn't seek his phone, correct?
Objection.
Overruled.
Correct.
Right. The medical examiner notified you on April 28th, 2022, that the manner of death, in her words, could not be determined. Is that right?
Yes.
She would not rule, at least in terms of the manner of death, would not rule this a homicide. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you agree that that's obviously a pretty significant finding.
Objection.
Allow it.
Her finding doesn't alter how we conduct our investigation, whether if it's undetermined or ruled a homicide. We're still going to continue to investigate one way, regardless of her determination.
So he's mostly right there. They can and should continue to investigate regardless of whether the determination is undetermined or homicide. It's not regardless of the determination, period. So he is correct in what he's saying. However, think back to his text messages where they were joking about how he was unable to get it ruled a homicide despite trying. So if it doesn't matter, if they're going to continue their investigation anyway, why does he need to try and get it ruled a homicide? And if it's ruled a homicide, they still haven't gone down every avenue for every suspect or every possibility. They haven't ruled out a number of things. Jackson came back with, well, you weren't pleased about that determination. And the witness says, well, it didn't matter. And Jackson confronts him with that very thing, those text messages. How on April 28th, DeChico sent Proctor a photograph of the autopsy report, and they get into the text about how Proctor was unable to convince her to rule it a homicide. Listen to this exchange referencing those text messages about not being able to convince her to make a determination of homicide.
You wrote a text message to DeChico, correct?
I did.
What was your response?
Of course, it's undetermined.
And then what else did you write?
She was a whack job.
Of course it's undetermined. She was a whack job, right? Those are your two responses, correct?
Yes.
You were talking about Dr. Scorti-Bello, the female medical examiner who came to the determination that this was undetermined in terms of the manner of death, correct?
I'm not sure who I'm referencing as far as she was a whack job, but the of course it's undetermined is a sarcastic response from me.
I think the reason he answered this way is because Jackson said female medical examiner. And where I think Jackson is going is the same place I was going earlier, except I don't think I said it. If he ultimately admits that he was talking about the medical examiner, I think the fact that the ME was a woman makes a difference. This guy obviously hates women. He's made that abundantly clear. So it's not just Karen Reed, who's a whack job. Karen Reed, who he doesn't know, had never met before, didn't have a lot of interaction with, and who, by the way, Trooper Buchanan testified that when he and Proctor spoke with Reed on the 29th, that the tone of the conversation was polite. She wasn't acting like a whack job. So he has no reason to call Reed a whack job. Maybe because she has no A, if you know what I mean. I think he is referring to the medical examiner using this same language. I think he doesn't like it when women don't give him what he wants. I think he thinks he's somehow superior. That's my opinion.
The reason you referred to Dr. Scortibello as a whack job is because the cut and dry case that you had hoped for wasn't really going your way, right?
Objection.
Sustained.
When you referred to she's a whack job, were you referring to Dr. Scortibello?
I don't recall.
Were you displeased with the undetermined finding instead of a homicide finding because that was an obstacle in your investigation?
Objection.
You can break that down.
Were you displeased about the undetermined finding?
No.
Would you have rather had
He's so full of crap. He is displeased. He and his buddies had a whole conversation about that very fact.
a determined finding that it was a homicide?
At the end of the day, it doesn't matter to my office. We still investigate the same exact way if it's ruled determined, undetermined, or homicide.
Well, then why would you say, of course it's undetermined? She was a whack job, sarcastically.
It's a sarcastic remark I made to Trooper DeChico.
Right, which sort of suggests displeasure rather than the reverse, correct?
Objection.
You'd agree that it's extremely unusual for the manner of death to be undetermined in a homicide investigation you've worked on, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
How many murder cases in the history of your career have you worked on in which the medical examiner made the determination that the manner of death could not be determined?
Objection.
I'm going to allow that.
I wouldn't feel comfortable putting a number on it. It's not a lot. I couldn't ballpark it for you, but I know it's not a lot.
Well, Trooper Proctor, you were asked this exact question in February of 2024 at another proceeding.
Mm-hmm.
And you indicated that you had never seen it in your entire career, correct?
I'm trying to run it.
Well, you were asked the question, so first, what do you mean by, of course it's undetermined? And your answer was, I said it at the time, it was kind of like, not like figuratively, of course, of course, like I had never really seen that before in a homicide, end quote. Correct?
Yes.
Your statement in February of 2024, under oath, was you'd literally never seen that in any homicide you've ever worked, right?
Yes.
After she reached that conclusion, you discussed this with one of your colleagues.
Remember, he was like a baby homicide detective at the time of Reed's case. The fact that he'd never seen that before doesn't go to whether or not they can get a conviction when the ME has ruled undetermined. That's not what this goes to. What this goes to is his state of mind and how he was perceiving how things needed to be. And that's relevant to if or why he was pushing for a specific determination from the ME. Jackson pursues this and through questioning basically suggests that Proctor wanted to put pressure on the ME to make that determination of homicide. And Proctor says, absolutely not.
To begin with, Trooper Proctor, do you recognize the face page of that series of text messages in tab 12?
Yes.
Is that text messages between you and Trooper Chico, one of your colleagues?
It is, yes.
Turn to page 2632, if you wouldn't mind. Tell me when you're ready.
Go ahead, sir.
Trooper Chico texted you, rookie move, not going into a meeting with the ME and getting that homicide determination, correct?
Yes.
How did you interpret that? Rookie move, not getting that homicide determination.
Knowing Trooper Chico, it's him busting my chops and joking with me.
Because you see it as your job, you and Trooper Chico, to go in and get the homicide determination. That's your job, right?
Not at all, sir.
You're not looking so much for her opinion as looking to give her your opinion, right?
Absolutely not.
You responded, Yuri and I, who's Yuri?
Sergeant Mechanic.
Yuri and I had 2 conference calls with her, sent her numerous photos, etc. We laid out the entire case for her. That was your response, correct?
Yes.
You were explaining how much effort you went to try to get her to change your opinion to homicide, right?
Objection.
No, not at all.
Chico then responds, not good enough. Should have had me and Jeff do it, right?
Yes, that was his response.
Busting your chops that you didn't meet the standard of getting her to change her mind to make it a homicide, right? That's what he was busting your chops about.
We would never try to change the mind of a medical examiner. The doctor who conducts the autopsy often has questions. They want to know the facts, kind of what had transpired leading up to a victim's death. It happens not only in homicides, but the unattended deaths we also attend to, suicide and overdose. So it's common to have these conversations with doctors.
It's common to have these conversations with doctors. The doctors want information. That's true. That raises a couple of questions in my mind. Did the doctor ask for the whole case to be laid out for her? Did the doctor request these 2 meetings where they went in and laid out everything and she still wouldn't call it a homicide? Had she already made her determination or told them this is what my determination is going to be on the report, and then they went and tried to convince her and change her mind? In what order did these things occur, and who asked for these meetings? Who asked for information and when?
Right. But in response to getting the information that she made the determination and held on to it, that this was undetermined, your answer was, of course it's undetermined. She was just a whack job, right?
With sarcasm.
Ultimately, did the doctor change her opinion?
No.
But the determination of the medical examiner, that didn't matter to you, right? Because you had already decided you were going to charge Miss Reed with murder anyway.
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Yeah, the determination did not matter as we continued on with the investigation.
Notwithstanding the medical findings in the case, correct? That it was not determined to be a homicide, right?
Considering the manner, but...
And that's because even though
In fairness to the prosecution side, the way Jackson is saying this is iffy. He's not saying something that's not true. They can continue to investigate if it's ruled undetermined. So that doesn't mean notwithstanding that it wasn't a homicide. Undetermined means undetermined. It doesn't mean it isn't a homicide. It doesn't mean it is. It means undetermined.
the words of the prior group chat that this whole thing stinks, you were going to make it cut and dry by putting it on the girl, putting serious charges on the girl, notwithstanding what the medical examiner said, right?
Objection.
Sustained. You were actually asked this question, whether or not it would have an impact on your decision, notwithstanding what the medical examiner's decision was, correct? Your decision to charge her. Is that right?
Yes.
On February 1st, 2024, you were asked, so what you're telling this grand jury today, and you expect this grand jury to believe that you didn't care whether the medical examiner came back with a homicide determination? It doesn't matter to you? And your answer, quote, no, because either way, Ms. Reed was going to be charged. Right?
Correct.
That's how you make a case cut and dry, isn't it?
Objection.
Sustained.
To hell with the medical evidence. Karen Reed was going to be charged because that's what you had decided to do, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
I want to change gears for a second and ask you about some electronic data, specifically as it pertains to Jennifer McCabe. You're aware that Jennifer McCabe deleted texts and calls from her phone before she turned it over to you?
Objection.
I'll allow that. Were you aware of that?
I'm not aware of that.
Are you aware that there were texts and calls missing from her phone before having that phone turned over to you?
I'm not aware of that.
Did you look at the extraction report, the Celebrite extraction report from her phone?
I have, yes.
And you didn't see the columns marked deleted, 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 deleted?
No, not that area, no.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Not that area.
Not that area, meaning?
No.
What does that mean? I don't know what you mean by not that area.
I went through the Celebrite report, but clearly I didn't review that tab.
So he doesn't know when it's his job to know. And he testifies that he reviewed the Celebrite report, but he skipped some pages? Really? But this is an investigation that's thorough and with integrity?
So as you sit here, you're unaware of whether or not multiple texts and multiple phone calls were deleted from her phone that you have in your possession?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Yeah, I'm not aware right now, sir.
All right, bud, you've got all these regrettable remarks that you've made, unprofessional things that you've done that you shouldn't have done, and you've admitted that. You're unaware of all kinds of other evidence. So now that you're aware, might you change your mind about your conclusion? Actually, he was aware before this trial. He had to have been. There have been other proceedings at which he's testified. How could he not be aware as he sits here?
As the case agent, as the case officer, do you believe it might be important to find out whether or not that phone appeared to have been manipulated or altered in some way before it was turned over? Would that be something that you would normally do?
That'd be important.
But you didn't do it with Jim McCabe's phone.
I didn't personally handle that, no.
Again, it's somebody else's fault. Let's forget about the fact that he had the Celebrite report. So he could have done that by simply properly reviewing the report. But he wants to blame somebody else. He's supposed to be the lead on this. Blaming somebody else is a pattern of behavior with him. And you know, in spite of all of the inadequacies, if I want to be generous, I'll call them inadequacies and mistakes and failures. In spite of all that, if he regrets anything, if he's smart, he's not showing that. What he's doing instead is doubling down. Imagine being in an argument with this guy outside of the benefit of the protection of a court and witnesses.
Did you ever seize Nicole Albert's phone?
No.
Did you ever seize Brian Albert's phone?
No.
Colin Albert's?
No.
Chris Albert's?
No.
Julie Albert's?
No.
Were you concerned that if you seized any or all of their phones, especially Colin, Julie, and Chris, that there might be some indicators that you knew them on those phones?
No, that thought never crossed my mind.
But the fact remains, you never sought to seize any of those, did you?
No, I don't.
And you never asked, irrespective of what you saw in the Celebrite report, you never asked Jennifer McCabe whether or not that was a complete and thorough, complete and accurate, I should say. Let me ask it a different way. Did you ever ask Jennifer McCabe whether or not she ever altered anything on her phone before turning it in?
I did not. Again, I didn't handle Miss McCabe's phone. I do the cell phone extraction on it.
I want to ask you about...
He says he didn't handle McCabe's phone or do the extraction. And based on everything we've heard, I believe that he did not personally do the extraction, or at least I'm inclined to believe that. But wasn't he one of the people that attended Jen McCabe's home at the time she handed over her cell phone? If I'm remembering that correctly, and he was the one to whom she handed that cell phone, he can't sit here on the stand and say he never handled her cell phone. And if he was the one who was there on that day to collect the cell phone, when Carrie Roberts was there too, I think, it would be a natural question to ask, did you alter or delete anything? And I recall Jen McCabe testifying that she was told it was okay for her to delete texts between her and her daughters. So the investigator who told her that knows, not only knows, but gave permission for her to alter that phone.
another issue concerning a potential conflict of interest. You were well aware that Canton PD was supposed to be, we talked about this at some length, conflicted off the case as of January 29th, 2022, right?
Correct.
And you even put it in that text message, NOCAT, it's total opposite. They have to recuse themselves, BPD. Same with Canton, right?
Yes.
Those are your words on January 29th, right?
Yes.
And you knew that one of the reasons for Canton PD to recuse itself is because of the relationship between the Alberts and one of the detectives on Canton PD, Kevin Albert, right?
Correct.
You knew that Kevin Albert was the primary source of the conflict, correct?
Yes.
And you knew that he, above everybody else, should be completely removed from any contact with the investigation or the investigators, right?
Correct.
Yet when you wanted to coordinate witnesses for interviews in this case, who'd you turn to?
I texted Kevin Albert to see if he could secure a conference room for us to conduct interviews at the station.
Heads up to all witnesses. And why are they conducting interviews at the Canton Police Station?
The same Kevin Albert to help coordinate these witness interviews, who's the brother of Brian Albert, right?
Yes.
On January 30th, 2022, at about 11:55 a.m., Kevin Albert texts you on your personal cell phone, Paul G. is reviewing the reports now. Steve Seraph is here if you need to interview him, and we can call Stephen Mullaney in as well, end quote. You see that?
Yes.
Who's Paul G?
Lieutenant Paul Gallagher.
So Kevin Albert, a Canton PD officer, and an Albert is texting you about Paul Gallagher, another Canton officer, about interviewing Steve Seraph, another Canton officer, and Steve Mullaney, a second Canton officer, correct?
Correct.
What investigation was Kevin Albert referring to in the text?
The death of John O'Keefe.
This investigation.
Correct.
Did you tell Kevin Albert it's completely inappropriate for him to be involved in this case at all?
I did not.
Did you tell him he shouldn't be having any contact with any of the witnesses? And he shouldn't even be having contact with you? Did you tell him that?
I did not.
What you did write back was, quote, okay, you and I are coming in at 1 to interview a firefighter, Katie, correct?
That's right.
So not only did you tell him that you were engaged in the process of obtaining interviews, you told him the name of the interviewee, right?
Yes.
Another heads up, this is who we're going to interview. Aside from what Jackson is bringing up, I mean, Kevin Albert shouldn't have anything to do with any of this. If Proctor wants to interview officers who were at the scene, because that's legitimate for him to ask them questions as to what they saw, heard, etc. If Proctor wants to do that, then he needs to contact those officers himself individually, not go through Kevin Albert of all people. And one of the questions I have is, what was it that led Kevin Albert to be making these particular arrangements? The content of this text shows that something came before that, because Kevin Albert's already got the information and is working it out to be able to text what he's texting here. So what was the lead up into this?
And you were going to do it at Canton PD, correct?
Correct.
So you're sharing information about the identity of witnesses that you intend to interview with Brian Albert's brother, right?
Yes.
Then you asked Kevin Albert to actually contact the witnesses in order to schedule their interviews, didn't you?
Yeah, I believe it was Officer Mullaney and Seraph.
Look at page 25. Kevin Albert texts, okay, so I'll get Mullaney in as well. You interviewing her here? And you respond, yeah. If we can line them up for 1:30 and 2, that would be great, correct?
Yes.
So you were leaving it up to Kevin Albert to contact and coordinate with the witnesses that you intended to interview at Canton PD, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Correct.
You then answered anytime in the ballpark. I'm sorry. Yes, you answered anytime in the ballpark. Then you went on and said from 1:30 on, correct?
Yes.
Kevin Albert then says, okay, sounds good. And then he responds, if you want to interview witnesses in the recorded room here, you're more than welcome. You see that?
I do.
He was referring to an interview room or an interrogation room where there's surreptitious recording devices, correct?
Yes.
That's to help facilitate memorializing interviews that police officers want to take with any witness in a crime, right?
Correct.
That would mean that if you used a recorded room, those recordings would be in the hands of which agency?
That's why we did not use that recorded room.
Of the officer.
If there was an interview room, available with recording devices. Like, they're all equipped like that these days. Why not avail yourself of that? But they shouldn't be doing that at that police station at all. And the witness says, well, the reason we couldn't do that, use their video equipment, is because they were conflicted at the same time as we're seeing texts that we're seeing, and that he's making arrangements to go there to begin with. Does he think that everybody is illogical or stupid? I mean, his level of lies is at that of a 7th grader.
He offered. We did not use it.
Did you see that as a problem?
That he offered?
Yeah.
No, I don't, sir.
You see that as a problem because he might, I don't know, take some of those interviews and forward them to his brother?
Objection.
Sustained. You can ask it differently, Mr. Jackson.
Were you concerned that Kevin Albert was offering to utilize Canton's recording programs facility in order to get access to what the witnesses were saying so that he could then forward that or tell his brother?
No,
Never crossed your mind?
never.
That never crossed my mind. Well, then why not record it? So Jackson is doing the trapdoor thing again. It doesn't matter what the witness says at this point because his reasoning doesn't hang together and his explanations contradict each other in essence.
Well, if it never crossed your mind, why didn't you go ahead and use the recording you were?
Typically don't record our interviews.
That's not what you said a second ago. You said the reason we didn't use the recording room.
What? They typically don't record their interviews? Okay, that can't be true. That can't be true. I'm sorry. I'm just a little bit mind blown at the moment.
Because of the obvious possibility that Kevin Albert and Canton PD could have access to the recordings.
Objection.
Sustained.
Didn't you say that's why we didn't use it?
No.
That was your answer, right?
No,
What did you say?
that we didn't use it.
When I said, if you made a recording, it would be in the hands of which agency? Obviously Canton PD. And your answer was, that's why we didn't use the recording room, right?
No, I don't recall saying that's why we didn't use the room.
You just said it, Trooper Proctor. I mean, it's been 10 minutes, been 4 minutes.
No,
You don't remember that?
not specifically stated like that.
All right, let me ask you a different one.
You know, they could get the record read back to establish that or to confirm that. And I think the reason Jackson is not going to is because it doesn't matter in a sense. The jury heard him say this a couple of minutes ago. And unless they're sleeping, they didn't miss that. And so if he can't recall something really important that he said a minute ago, or he's willing to sit here and lie and dance around like he's danced around so many other things, what does that say about him? What does that say about his ability to properly conduct a homicide investigation?
If you weren't concerned that the interviews could be compromised by Canton PD and Kevin Albert, why didn't you just use the room? It was offered up.
Typically we don't record interviews. With a cooperating witness, we just sit down with them, take notes. If it's someone we deem necessary to actually have a recording of, then we'll pursue that option.
Did you watch the color change in his face as he spoke? And who deems it necessary? It's usually standard.
Trooper Proctor, after you knew that Canton Police Department was conflicted off the case, you continue to have a very close relationship with yet another Albert, Kevin Albert, correct?
We worked on a cold case together.
So you did have a close personal and professional relationship with Kevin Albert, didn't you?
I'd say it was a professional relationship.
Only a professional relationship?
Him and I were members at a gym together, and we worked a cold case together for several months.
Drinking, socializing, maybe?
Once in a while.
Right. So what beyond professional, right?
Yeah, acquaintances.
Drinking acquaintances, right?
On several occasions, yes.
Socializing acquaintances, right?
On several occasions.
So when you told
Minimize, deflect. He shouldn't have been put on a cold case with Kevin Albert if he was still working on this case. And given how much he slips up and how bad of a liar he is, you think another trained detective couldn't get anything out of him if they're having a couple of brews together? You think that? Jackson confronts Proctor with the fact that he failed to disclose that he had a relationship with Kevin Albert as well. So there's a fourth Albert, and he omitted admitted that information too.
But you didn't tell us about that one,
Objection.
I'll allow it.
correct?
I don't consider that a relationship. It's
Well, let's look at that. 5 months into this investigation, in July of 2022, you were actually continuing to socialize with Kevin Albert, weren't you?
yes,
On July 19th, 2022, you and Kevin Albert went out drinking together, didn't you? Chipper Proctor, I'm not asking to look for anything in the binder at this point. I'm asking for your memory.
I don't recall that.
You don't recall the date, or you don't recall?
July 19th, 2022.
You don't recall the?
That was good on Jackson's part because Proctor has been using that binder and looking for something in the binder as a way to buy himself time to think, as a way to buy himself time to sort of collect himself. And there have been times in this when he has taken a remarkably long period of time to find something. But that's because he's not really looking for the thing. He's hiding and buying time.
Trooper Proctor, are you on 2602?
I am.
The fact of the matter, does that refresh your recollection that on July 19th, 2022, you and Kevin Albert had been out drinking together?
It does.
In fact, the two of you got so drunk that Kevin Albert left his badge in your cruiser and couldn't find his gun the next morning, right?
Objection.
Overruled.
I can't speak to any level of intoxication, but I don't recall either of us being intoxicated.
Got it. So, isn't it true that at 7:20, July 20th, 2022, the day after, at 8:39 in the morning, you texted Kevin Albert, quote, "Found your badge in my cruiser this morning," end quote, correct?
Yes,
Then you texted him, "I can leave it in my locker at the gym, drop it off at your station, or leave it in my mailbox," correct?
correct.
Kevin Albert responds, "My mailbox. Did I take my gun?" And then included a wince face emoji, correct?
Correct.
So the fact of the matter is, you two got so drunk that he couldn't find his badge and had to ask you the next morning where his gun was, right?
Holy crap. And why are they out drinking, driving around the cruiser?
Again, I can't speak to any level of intoxication. Whether he just forgot it, I don't know.
I'm not asking you about his BAC, Trooper Proctor. I'm asking, have you seen drunk people before?
Yes.
You've been drunk before.
Yes, I have, sir.
We've all been drunk before, right?
Yes.
Was he drunk? Were you drunk that night?
I don't recall. It was a long time ago.
But he left his badge in your cruiser after a night of drinking. Isn't that right?
Yes.
Which means you were drinking and driving in your cruiser. Right?
From what I remember, we were down the Cape working on the cold case together and stopped for dinner.
Here's his explanatory narrative again instead of answering the question. He is providing a justification for his unacceptable behavior.
Had a few beers and then dropped him off.
The next morning, Kevin Albert also texted you. Kevin Albert responded, "It's bad!" Exclamation point, exclamation point. "I was hungover for sure today!" Exclamation point, exclamation point. "Couple tonight to make me feel good." End quote. Correct?
Correct.
You can take that down. Does that refresh your recollection that the two of you had been out drinking the night before? He got so drunk that he couldn't find his badge and he couldn't even find his gun.
Yes, it does refresh my memory.
Right. And you're in your cruiser.
Yes, sir.
And this is with Brian Albert's brother, Trooper Proctor.
Correct.
I'm going to change gears, Trooper Proctor. You personally collected John O'Keefe's clothes from the hospital at Good Sam in Brockton, did you not?
I did.
At the time you were at Good Sam, you actually had the opportunity, you had the occasion to see Mr. O'Keefe in the hospital, correct?
Yes.
You also had the occasion to see his clothing in the hospital, correct?
Yes.
That's the clothing that you ultimately gathered, is that right?
Correct. I do.
Is that a photograph of you? I'm sorry, it's not of you, but do you see your legs in that photograph?
Yes,
Okay, and you also see the legs of Mr. O'Keefe on the hospital gurney, correct?
I do.
And you see a pile of clothes there?
Correct.
While he's waiting, he's looking awfully intently at that photograph, and he may be calibrating and recalibrating. And while he was sitting there looking at the photo, nobody's asking him anything. He's not the focus at the moment. He just saw something in that photo that caused him stress because his color changed right there.
May I inquire?
Yes.
Thank you. Do you see this? Do you see the photograph in front of you? Is that the same photograph that's been published up on the television screen?
Yes, sir.
Directing your attention to the leftmost portion of the photograph, you see the clothes. First, the clothes on the ground.
I do, yes.
Okay, that appears to be what? What items or articles of clothing do you see?
The T-shirt, possibly the jeans.
Gray shirt as well?
Yes.
Okay. And those are your
Socks. Socks.
legs to the uppermost part of the screen, correct?
I believe.
In the blue pants?
Yes,
And you see to the leftmost portion of the screen a chair.
I do.
You see what's on that chair?
My binder.
That's your portfolio?
It is.
Okay. That's something that you carry routinely as you're investigating during the course of your investigations?
Yes.
You keep your notes and things of that nature?
Yes.
Pens, paper?
Correct.
All right.
Is that what you carry around? Yes, he's pinned down now so that he can't say that the picture of him in the Sally port carrying that portfolio isn't him or that he wasn't carrying it. So he's pinned down. The jury gets a view of that portfolio. Is that where you keep your pens and paper and that sort of thing? Yep. And I want to ask, is that where you might keep a pile of broken taillight?
You indicated that you took possession of those clothing items from Good Samaritan Hospital, correct? Correct. You bagged them, B-A-G-G-E-D, bagged them? Correct?
Yes.
And then what did you do with them after that?
We secured them in Sergeant Buchanan's pickup truck.
And then what happened to them after they were secured in his pickup truck?
We traveled to Dighton to Mr. Reed's house.
Once you ultimately got back, I don't want to have to take you through the entire, everybody knows where you went.
Okay.
Sergeant Buchanan's already testified. You get back to Canton at some point, correct?
Yes.
Ultimately, were the clothes transported into your facility
Yes.
at the DA's office?
Correct.
Okay. What did you do with them after that?
We brought them to the evidence processing.
I'm going to ask you what you did, not what we did, what you did.
Sergeant Buchanan and I brought them to the evidence processing area, laid out butcher paper so the clothes could dry, put them on.
Proctor is doing this again. And every chance he gets, he's diffusing responsibility. He is distancing himself right here from whatever happened with the clothing. And the reason I know this is more than simply his pattern of diffusing responsibility is because Jackson said to him, I want to know what you did, not we. And without missing a beat, Proctor says, Sergeant Buchanan and I, still distancing, still not clear about who it was that put down the butcher paper, laid out the clothes, or whatever else went on. He is hiding something right here.
On there, in that area. And then I brought 2 cell phones to Trooper Garino so he could try to attempt to extract the phones.
What did you do with the clothing after it was dried out?
So the next day, Trooper DeChico arrived and brought them into the permanent evidence area where only him and another trooper in my office have access to. So they were secured from that at that point.
How does he know that? Does he know that because it was written down somewhere? Because he saw it? And we've just missed a whole bunch of time. Now, Jackson didn't drill down on that, and I'm assuming that he has a reason for why he's doing things in the order that he's doing or what he focuses on at any given time. So we've missed who actually really put out the butcher paper, laid out the clothes, how that was done, and where were these taillight pieces? That was omitted. He earlier testified that those taillight pieces were also on the table and that there wasn't an evidence officer available, which is why the clothes had to be left there. Buchanan didn't know what happened to them. And Proctor is testifying now that DeChico bagged the clothes and put them into evidence, which only a limited number of people have access to. He's got to throw that in there. He wasn't asked that either. But the evidence bag containing the clothing didn't have DeChico's name on them. Those shirts that were two shirts shoved into one bag, had Trooper Proctor's name on it. And it wasn't submitted to the lab until much later. So he's lying. Now, of course, perjury is really hard to prove because you have to prove intent to lie. He could claim he forgot or he's mistaken or dance around words or any number of weaselly little things that he tends to do, but he's lying.
So you didn't book them into evidence?
I did not know.
When they're booked into evidence, there's supposed to be a log of that, correct?
I'm sorry?
There's supposed to be a log of that when they're booked into evidence, correct?
Yes.
You're the case officer on the case. One of your responsibilities is to make sure that chain of custody is maintained throughout the entirety of the investigation, all the way up to a courtroom, correct?
Yes.
Where's the log of those items being booked into evidence?
There was a chain of custody from when they entered the facility.
Aside from avoiding the question, not answering the question, deflecting, doubling down, I think he is counting on the jury to not understand what chain of custody means. He's saying there was a chain of custody. He's counting on the jury to not know. Where's the log?
The DA's office, and then when Trooper DeChico created a label for him, but also put him in a secure facility.
Can you show me where that is?
I'm not the evidence office. I don't have that.
I see. So you didn't bring a log with you of any sort concerning the chain of custody of these items, correct?
No.
His job is to maintain the file. He knows he has to attend court on this day. His job is to ensure the integrity of all of it, including chain of custody. He knows this is a standard thing that they have to prove in court. He's the case officer. So why doesn't he have a log? So much getting omitted conveniently here.
As a matter of fact, the reason you didn't bring that chain of custody log is because none exists. Isn't that right?
Objection.
Does a physical log exist starting from January 29th, 2022 to today?
Yes.
Where's that physical log, sir?
Who? I'm not an evidence officer, so I don't know how that. Yeah. So I don't know how that's generated.
Right. So as a case officer, you have no idea where an evidence log is that has something as insignificant as, I don't know, the victim's clothing.
Objection.
The fact of the matter is, the evidence log attendant to this case regarding those clothing items starts on March 14th when they were taken to the crime lab, correct?
That's when the clothing was transported to the lab.
And that's the only log we have of what happened to those clothes between January 29th and today.
Objection.
Do you know that?
I don't. I'm not off the top of my head, ma'am.
It's your job to know. You're the case officer. Where are your flippin' notes? Where's the log if it exists? And if it doesn't exist, just say so. Why don't you know? It's your job to know. At best, if you're being generous. This guy is lazy and incompetent. And that's if you're being very generous.
I want to talk for a second about the searches in Brian Albert's front lawn that took place on and after January 29th, 2022. As the case officer, Trooper Proctor, you also took control of the taillight pieces that were ultimately claimed to have been found at that location, correct?
Not in all searches.
Which of the pieces that were found were you responsible for taking control over?
8th, 11th, and 18th.
So who had control over the items that were found before the 8th? You said the 8th, 11th, and 18th, right?
Those are items that I had found on those days and that I had processed and essentially bagged and tagged them and handed them over to our evidence officer. There was multiple days that troopers were out there looking for more evidence.
So there would be a log of that too, right?
Again, how the system works as far as the evidence comes in, I can't speak to that.
Are you flipping kidding me? He's a homicide detective and he can't speak to what the system is? Are you kidding me? How stupid does he think everybody is? How accustomed is this guy to getting away with lies? It is his job to understand this and to make sure the records in his case are complete and correct. And you may not know the nuances and details of another department's job or another unit's job or their day-to-day tasks. You may not be able to speak to those things, but you do have an understanding of standard operating procedure. You do, and you need to have an understanding of how that other unit's job relates to and impacts on your case. So this is nonsense as well. It's so frustrating. I don't know about you, but I just want to walk away. And why is anybody spending their time listening to this baloney? Except there is a reason why. There are 3 big reasons why. One is that what happened to John O'Keefe matters. Finding the truth of what happened to Officer O'Keefe matters. It's important. Another reason is there is a woman sitting accused, fighting for her life. And the third reason is public interest. And I'm not talking about interest as in entertainment. I'm talking about the public interest in making sure that the institutions that people rely on are at least satisfactory, that there's some level of integrity there. Those are 3 big reasons not to throw up your hands and walk away. This is something else.
So you have no idea what the chain of custody of any of these items are, the clothing or the taillight material, from January 29th until March 14th, when the evidence log starts. Is that what you're saying?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
There is a log. I mean, it's in our system where labels are created, and it generates the time and date that a label is created, and then it shows that it's at our office in a secured facility, and then it was brought to the lab on the 14th.
Then show us the log. Show me the money. Show us the log.
What happens if the label is created and says something like, I don't know, February 4th? What happens to the items before February 4th?
They were stored in a secured facility, a secured room.
Says who? Where's the log?
Objection.
Is there a log of that?
Not to my knowledge.
Boom. Is there a log of where the evidence was and what was going on with it prior to these dates when these barcodes were printed out? He says, not to my knowledge. So that means nobody knows what's happening with evidence from the time it's collected until whenever they get around to making a label. Could be weeks later. Nobody knows what's going on with that. Anybody could do anything with it. Every single case that they've handled up until now is going to get looked at. And you know what? What he's saying is provable one way or another. Because all it takes is one other case that the state police has done showing those logs. But of course, the way he phrases it, not to my knowledge, I think he thinks that gives him plausible deniability, where he can say, but I didn't know. I wasn't actually lying. I didn't know.
You were responsible for seizing Miss Reed's car, correct?
Yes.
And you originally claimed that that seizure took place at 5:30 p.m. Is that right?
Correct.
You signed numerous affidavits under oath, claiming that you did not seize Miss Reed's vehicle until 5:30 p.m. on January 29, 2022, right?
Correct.
At the time that you seized Miss Reed's vehicle, you were unaware that there was alarm.com surveillance footage of the area from which the car was seized, correct?
Correct.
The fact of the matter is, that was false. The car was not seized at 5:30, was it?
4:16 p.m.
Right. An hour and change, an hour and 18 minutes, hour and 20 minutes earlier. Is that right?
Yes.
Did you ever seek to change or amend the error, the false statement about the time
So
the car received and seized in any of those documents that you filed under oath?
when I
Before Jackson can even get the question out of his mouth, you hear Lally sighing, and you hear Proctor starting to say, so, because he's gearing up to give that explanation and justification. Of course, he could have and should have sought to amend that information that was before the courts. I mean, it happens where a police officer makes a mistake and says, oh crap, I made an error and now this is part of the record in the court. I need to fix that error. So you do, and you can explain it. You can say, I'm sorry, I was mistaken. I'm sorry. Any number of reasons, whatever the reason is that the officer made the mistake, you can do that. That might fall under the category of integrity. So he doesn't do that. And in addition, when there is irrefutable proof that he was wrong, instead of telling the truth, he's about to, I believe, offer justification. So we've got a guy who can't take responsibility. You've heard me talk about suspect like this. This is a police officer. Shouldn't be this. And by the way, this is an example of why a police report, while it may be evidence of any number of things, a police report in itself is not evidence that the accused committed the crime. It's not the report itself.
Incorrectly transcribed at times. It was on the first affidavit I had written. And then as I continued to write other search warrants, I used that as a template. So I never caught it on the first one, and that's the reason those times are off on the other affidavits I had wrote.
So the first one was false, and then every single one after that was false too.
There was just an incorrect transcription of time.
Okay, that can happen where you refer back to a note that's incorrect and so you keep making the same mistake. My question now is, well, when did you learn of the error? So maybe you submitted these documents over and over and over with the same mistake because you were referring back to the original mistake. Okay, when did you realize that it was an error? When did you obtain the video from the Reed household? When did you review that video? And once you knew that you had made the error, why did you not then immediately go and correct it? You see, his explanation that while it's not so bad sounds good if you only focus on his justification and not the rest of the facts.
Correct transcription of the time.
Yes.
Call that, I don't know, a Scrivener's error?
Objection.
Ask it differently.
Sure. Was it a typo?
Yes.
It was a typo. So you got the 4 wrong, you got the 1 wrong, and you got the 6 wrong. And those turned into 5 and 3 and 0, right?
They were typos, sir.
I hadn't caught that, but that was a good one. When you make a typo, you don't make a typo on the entire thing.
Fact of the matter is, you delivered that car to Canton PD, to the Sallyport garage, before a single piece of taillight material was ever found in this case. Trooper Proctor, is that correct?
Correct. It arrives at 5:31.
And you also towed it to the Canton Police Department because that was conveniently close to the location at 34 Fairview, to the crime scene, right?
That was not my decision.
Whose decision was it?
I don't recall. I know that
Well, you're the case officer.
I wouldn't.
Who decides?
It wasn't my decision. I did not make that call, sir.
So
Not my fault. Again.
who are we pointing the finger at? Was it Sergeant Buchanan?
Objection.
Was it Sergeant Buchanan who made that decision to transport it to Canton?
It's a supervisor's decision. I don't know who it came from.
Was it Lieutenant Tully?
Again, I don't know who it came from.
So you were just following orders.
Yes.
Got it. You are aware that Massachusetts State Police, your agency, actually has not one, but 2 barracks. One in Middleborough, one in Foxborough, that are both closer as a crow flies than the Canton PD Sallyport, from where the car was towed, correct?
Yes.
Both of those facilities were passed by, and the car was ultimately placed at Canton PD Sallyport at 5:31 or so, right?
Yes.
I did not know that. I can't think of an explanation that would make this make sense from the police side. So not only did they go right by the other places and save public money too for the tow, but they take it to a place that's conflicted, and they knew it was conflicted.
And you're aware that that Sally Port is about 3 minutes from 34 Fairview?
Yes.
Trooper Proctor, you were the lead case officer on this case. That means that you were required to collect and maintain all the videos that were pulled in connection with this investigation, correct?
Correct.
And you obviously are aware of your legal obligation to turn over any and all exculpatory information that you might come in possession of, correct?
Objection.
That's sustained.
You did pull a lot of video in connection with this case, did you not?
Yes.
About 290 videos from the Ring camera located in the driveway at One Meadows. Does that sound about right? I don't expect you to have counted every single one, but just under 300?
Correct.
A ton of them, right?
Yes.
Another 140 videos or so from the front door Ring camera of that same location, One Meadows, right?
Yes.
9 videos from the Waterfall Bar and Grill.
Yes.
8 videos from the Temple Beth
Yes.
facility. 5 videos from CF McCarthy's.
Yes.
4 dash cam videos.
Correct.
2 videos from Canton Town Library.
Correct.
2 videos from Cassie's Corner Store, right?
Yes.
2 videos from the cars test on Miss Reed's vehicle. Is that right?
Yes.
And 2 videos from the location at 34 Fairview where individuals were using leaf blowers.
Correct.
All of those, I did some rough math, 360 odd videos were handed over to the defense in or about June of 2022. Is that your understanding?
Objection.
That's sustained.
They were provided in discovery to the defense ultimately, right?
Okay. Yes.
Does it sound like, I don't expect you to have the date down, Pat, but spring of 2022, sound about right? Spring, early summer?
Yes.
All right. But there was additional video surveillance footage that you chose to hold back from that discovery, correct?
Objection.
Did you hold back videos?
I did not, Your Honor.
Okay, next question.
There's surveillance video from Canton Police Department's Sallyport garage that wasn't turned over, right?
That video was discovered later on and then handed over.
The first time you revealed the existence of that footage was in that separate proceeding in February of 2024. Is that right?
Yes.
You were questioned about it, and you knew you were under oath at the time, correct?
Correct.
And that's when you disclosed, yes, there is Sallyport footage, and I've seen it.
The video I was referencing was the exterior Sallyport camera where you can't make out anything.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. The exterior, you said, exterior, outside,
Correct.
meaning the one of the driveway.
Right.
That little weasel. And you know what? If he says, oh, there's the exterior and you can't see anything, doesn't matter. Hand it over.
And you say you can't make anything out now.
There's 2 different ones. There's the main driveway camera and then there's this exterior Sallyport camera.
You were asked about this set of videos at that other hearing, right?
Yes.
And you indicated at the time that there was one grainy video, which sort of mainly black and grainy,
Yes.
and another one that showed you and Sergeant Buchanan arriving at Canton PD behind Miss Reed's vehicle on the tow truck. Is that right?
Yes.
You were asked very specifically, are you aware whether there are any cameras in the garage in the Sallyport where Karen Reed's SUV was parked? And your answer was yes. Right? In the garage.
Yeah, I don't recall.
Do you recall being asked that question?
No.
I can repeat it if you wish.
Yeah, please.
Question. Are you aware of whether there are any cameras in the garage or Sallyport where Karen Reed's SUV was parked? Answer, yes.
Okay.
And then you answered, have you reviewed the video footage of that garage? Answer, I saw one very grainy video and then another of Sergeant Buchanan and I arriving in the main entrance around 5:30 following the vehicle. Period. You remember that answer?
Yes.
That clearly was an answer to the question, did you see video of the interior of the garage, right?
Objection.
Sustained. Ask it differently.
Were you answering a question about video inside the garage?
No, I was answering the question about what video I observed, and it was exterior video that I observed.
Although the answer to the question was cameras in the garage or Sallyport. That was the question.
If I was aware of any.
And your answer was yes. And then the next question is, have you reviewed the footage? And your answer was, I saw one very grainy video, and then another, Sergeant Buchanan and I arriving in the main entrance around 5:30 following the vehicle, right? That was your testimony.
Yeah, those 2 videos I'm referring to in the exterior of the building.
Question, when did you watch the video from the Sallyport? Answer, I haven't reviewed it, sir, in quite some time, so I can't recall what's on there. End quote. You remember that?
Yes.
So obviously at the time, in February of 2024, you had that video surveillance, you had that footage for so long that you couldn't remember exactly what was on it because it had been, quote, quite some time, right?
The exterior Sallyport camera.
Except you weren't asked about the exterior. You were asked, question, when did you watch the video from the Sallyport, right? That was the question.
Well, that was the video we had, so that was how I referenced it. That was the exterior Sallyport video.
Why didn't you say to the person
This is the same game. It's the same nonsense. It's maddening. He's demonstrating a pattern. How does this guy have a job?
who's questioning you under oath, I don't know anything about video inside the Sallyport. I'm referring to outside the building. Why didn't you say that and clarify it?
I should have clarified it, sir.
Because you'll agree, it sounds a hell of a lot like, an awful lot like, you're talking about what's inside the Sallyport, right?
Objection.
Sustained.
The next question you were asked, why did you review the video of the Sallyport? Answer, we review every video we pull, and we pull a lot of video. End quote. Do you remember that?
I do.
Not one word in that testimony. Not one word says exterior, does it?
No, it does not.
You testified that you had obtained and reviewed the Sallyport garage video so long ago that you literally couldn't even remember what was on it, right?
Correct.
You did know, however, that if you had video at the Sallyport, it would clearly show that Miss Reed's vehicle arrived at 5:30, 5:31. Right? You knew that, correct?
Yes, from the driveway camera.
But you withheld that video out of 360 odd videos that you turned over. You withheld that one and never mentioned it until February of 2024, correct?
Objection.
Is that true?
I'm not aware of that, withholding that.
On April 4th, 2024, it's getting late. On April 4th, 2024, you turned over one video from the interior of the Sallyport garage, correct?
Yes, sir.
The interior, not the exterior, right?
Correct.
And that, remarkably enough, was a grainy video, right?
Yes.
And that video is missing the precise time that that vehicle was delivered to the Sallyport, correct?
Objection.
Was it? I'll allow it.
I don't recall.
It's missing 42 minutes at the beginning, and it jumps from 5:08 p.m. to 5:50 p.m., correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
Have you reviewed the video?
Yes.
Did you see that the timestamp jumps from 5:08 to 5:50?
Objection.
You reviewed the video, the grainy video, correct?
Yes.
And that's from a camera perspective that would show, or that does show, the right rear area of the SUV after it's pulled in, correct?
Yes.
Did you note that the time jumps from 5:08 to about 5:50 at the beginning of the video?
Yeah, I observed a jump in video.
And that was about 42 minutes, correct?
Approximately, yes.
You're aware that there's another video from the interior of that Sallyport as well, correct?
Yes.
The second video from the interior of the Sallyport is inverted, correct?
Yes.
You're now aware of that.
I am.
Did you recover that video?
I did not.
Who did?
I believe Detective Lieutenant Tully received that from the Canton Police Chief.
Rafferty?
I believe so.
Who asked for it?
I'm not sure, sir. That
Did
was,
you make the request?
I did not.
How did you become aware that a request had been made?
I was made aware that the video had essentially existed from the interior Sallyport area.
By whom?
I was probably informed by Detective Lieutenant Tully.
So Lieutenant Tully tells you that a second video exists, correct?
Interior Sallyport cameras, yes.
When did he tell you that?
I don't recall.
Was it weeks ago or years ago?
That was more recent than, maybe a month ago.
Matter of fact, it was after the trial had already started. Mid-April, correct?
I don't recall. I thought it was before.
If it was before, was it weeks before, days before?
I don't recall.
I'm just trying to pin down, are we talking about 6 months ago or are we talking about 6 weeks ago?
It wasn't 6 months ago.
Okay, so a few weeks ago, you were told about the second video from Lieutenant Tully, right?
Yes.
Did he tell you he had already seen it?
I'm sure he watched it.
Did he tell you he needed you to go get it?
Objection.
I'll allow that.
No.
Okay, so when was the first time you saw it?
2 weeks ago? Month ago?
What were the circumstances in which you saw that video?
Just reviewing the video
Where?
at my desk.
So you pulled it, pardon me, you had access to the video. It
Yes.
was on your system somehow.
It was on thumb drives and a disk.
You You put that in your computer and just decided on your own to watch it, correct?
Yes.
And what did you notice?
One of the SUV being brought into the garage.
You're in the video, right? That's you toward the back of the truck.
Yep, I'm in the video. So Canton PD members there as well. Tow truck guy drops the vehicle off. He's in the front driver's seat. Exits. Sergeant Mechanic's there. I believe Berkowitz, the retired police chief.
Where was he?
He was kind of like mulling around the area. I feel like he was towards like the back open garage gate there.
The back
towards like the rear. Yeah.
Where you were?
Yes.
Was he the person? Did you note that there were certain individuals that just seemed to apparate out of nowhere, just appear?
Yes, there was one individual in like the top left corner of the video pushing a broom that kind of just appeared.
And also toward the back of the vehicle, somebody just, while you were at the back of the vehicle, just sort of appeared and walked out the side, correct?
Yes.
And was that Chief Berkowitz?
Yeah, it looks like him, yes.
Okay. So you and Chief Berkowitz are both toward the rear of the vehicle. He just apparates out of thin air because the video is missing some footage, correct?
It appears that way, or skips.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Or it skips. I don't know that system at all. So.
Okay. And you're holding what appears to be that same black portfolio that we saw in the hospital.
Yes.
So, anything else you noticed that was odd about the video? Other than the time skips?
So the timestamp on the bottom was inversed? Was it reversed?
I beg your pardon?
Yeah, the timestamp on the bottom of it was kind of backwards.
Oh. Oh, really?
Was it blue?
So instead of reading left to right, it was right to left. Okay.
Was it blue?
I believe it was yellow.
So the video you saw had a timestamp that was inverted, correct?
Yes.
How about the video itself? Is that inverted?
No, from the video I saw, the way the vehicle was brought in relation to the garage and the doors into the PD, it wasn't reversed or inverted.
It was or was not?
Was not.
So as you saw the video, the portion of the vehicle that purported to be the passenger side was in fact the passenger side, and the vehicle, the side of the vehicle that purported to be the driver's side was in fact the driver's side.
Yes, so I reviewed video yesterday just to rewatch it, and the one that I watched had the correct angle, it wasn't reversed. The car was brought in, tow truck driver gets out. From the driver's side, it wasn't reversed. The only thing reversed on it was like the timestamp on the bottom.
Were you watching video that was produced in this trial?
Yes.
So were you aware that the defense presented a piece of evidence?
Objection.
Thank you. Were you aware that the defense presented a piece of evidence where we inverted the video back to the correct,
No, it's not.
and that timestamp was inverted?
I was not aware of that.
Where did he watch this video? Because if it was the defense video that he watched, that's a big problem for somebody.
So that video?
Just the other day, I was reviewing it.
The next video is going to be summary. Thank you for listening to my ranting. Trust your gut. I'll see you in the comments.